My boss took credit for my work, so I let the system break. I'm Maya Chen, 28, and 3 days ago I watched my boss present the software I built from scratch to our biggest client. From outside the conference room glass, I could see Richard pointing at my code architecture slide. Lisa nodded eagerly. CEO Martin Taylor smiled like he'd discovered gold. But my name wasn't mentioned once, not even in the tiny footnotes on slide 47. If you're watching this right now, comment where you're from and hit subscribe if you've ever had your work stolen by someone who was supposed to be your mentor. What I did next changed everything. For 2 years, I'd been the only woman on the engineering team at Vertex Solutions. I was also the youngest and definitely the lowest paid. But I worked harder than anyone. When the MaxiCorp project landed, a $3.7 million contract to build an AI inventory management system, nobody wanted it. Too complex, they said. Impossible timeline, they complained. So Martin dropped it on my desk with a shrug. See what you can do with this, Maya. No pressure if it's too complicated. I didn't just do something with it. I made it revolutionary. For 6 months, I disappeared into the project. I skipped family dinners, canceled my vacation to Hawaii, and spent nights coding while the office was empty and dark. I created a predictive algorithm that could anticipate inventory shortages before they happened, something our competitors claimed was impossible. My system would save MaxiCorp millions every year. But as I stood outside that conference room, watching Richard flip through slides of my work with my name nowhere to be found, I felt something inside me crack. I'd asked for a raise 2 months ago. Richard had laughed and said, "Let's revisit after this quarter." That was 8 weeks of silence ago. The worst part? MaxiCorp's CTO Diana Wong pointed at my favorite module, the one I'd coded during a 72-hour marathon weekend, and asked who designed it. Richard smiled and said, "It was a team effort." Lisa nodded along. Nobody mentioned me. They didn't just forget me, they erased me. I didn't make a scene. I didn't burst through the door. I walked back to my desk, pulled out my notebook, and made a simple list. Every feature I'd built, every problem I'd solved, every hour I'd logged. Then I created a folder on my personal drive labeled "When They Ask." Inside, I saved a copy of my original project proposal with my name on it, screenshots of my commit history showing thousands of lines of code, and the email chain where Richard had called my solution probably impossible. The next morning, Richard called me into his office. His smile was practiced, rehearsed like a politician's. "Maya, I noticed you seemed upset yesterday." He didn't wait for my answer. "Look, this is how business works. I'm the project lead. I present to clients. You're just not ready for that level yet." I asked about my raise. He frowned like I'd said something inappropriate. "This really isn't the time to discuss compensation. Let's focus on implementation right now." That night, I didn't cry. I didn't vent to my roommate Jess. I just sat at my kitchen table and thought about what I'd built. The MaxiCorp system wasn't just code. It was my architecture, my logic, my problem solving. Nobody else on the team fully understood how the regional allocation engine worked. Nobody else knew about the backup protocols I'd added for when the system hit capacity limits. I decided then, I wouldn't sabotage anything. I wouldn't delete code or plant bugs. I would simply stop hiding how broken their process was. For months, I'd been covering for Richard's lack of technical knowledge. I'd been fixing Lisa's implementation mistakes before anyone noticed. I'd made them look good while staying invisible. Not anymore. What they didn't understand was that the system would need adjustments during implementation. The algorithms would need fine-tuning, and I was the only one who knew how to do it. On Monday, the implementation team had their first meeting. Richard assigned modules to everyone without consulting me. He gave Lisa the prediction engine, my most complex creation, even though she still struggled with basic machine learning concepts. He handed Tyler the regional allocation system, which required understanding the custom architecture I'd designed. I said nothing. I just nodded and accepted my assignment, documentation, the least visible, least credited part of any software project. During the meeting, Tyler asked how the region switching protocol handled conflicting instructions. Richard looked confused for a second, then recovered with, "It's all in Maya's documentation, right, Maya?" I smiled. "I'll be sure to include that in the next draft." It was starting. They didn't even know what they didn't know. By Wednesday, the first problems appeared. Tyler couldn't get the regional system to accept test data. Lisa's implementation of the prediction engine was returning error codes no one recognized. Richard called an emergency team meeting, his face tight with stress. "We need to fix these issues before the client check-in next week," he said, not quite making eye contact with me. "Maya, can you take a look at Tyler's module?" I nodded. "I can review his code." I didn't say I could fix it. I didn't say I would solve the problem. I just agreed to look. Small difference, huge implications. That night, I reviewed Tyler's code and sent him detailed notes on what was wrong. I explained the architecture, but didn't rewrite his implementation. I answered his questions, but didn't give him solutions. For the first time, I wasn't working overtime to make everyone else look good. Friday morning, Richard stopped by my desk. His friendly smile had disappeared. "The client check-in is Monday," he said. "Tyler's module is still failing tests, and Lisa can't get the prediction engine to run for more than 5 minutes without crashing." I looked up from my screen. "That's concerning. Have they tried following the architecture documents I provided?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Maya, I need you to be a team player here. We all know you built the prototype, but this is implementation now. Everyone has to pull their weight." I nodded. "I agree completely. That's why I've documented everything so thoroughly. Everyone should be able to implement their assigned modules based on my specifications." He walked away without another word. He finally realized the problem wasn't that I wasn't helping. It was that I was only doing exactly what I was assigned. The client check-in was a disaster. MaxiCorp's technical team had specific questions about how the system would handle inventory surges during seasonal peaks. Richard tried to answer with vague assurances about flexible capacity and adaptive algorithms. Diana Wang wasn't impressed. "I'd like to see the actual implementation details," she said. The technical specifications we approved were quite specific about how this would work. Richard glanced at me, a flash of panic in his eyes. I had those details. I had built those systems. But I hadn't been invited to speak. "Maya," he said finally, "would you mind explaining the surge handling protocols to Diana?" For the first time, I was acknowledged in a client meeting. Not because Richard wanted to share credit, but because he had no choice. I explained the system simply and clearly. Diana nodded with understanding, asked insightful questions, and finally smiled. "That makes perfect sense. I'm glad someone on the team has a handle on this." After the meeting, Richard cornered me in the hallway. "Good job in there," he said stiffly. "Next time, let's coordinate our presentation better beforehand." I looked him directly in the eyes. "I'm happy to present the technical aspects anytime. After all, I designed them." His smile faltered. "Let's not get hung up on who did what. This is a team project." "Is it?" I asked. "Because the team seems to be struggling with implementation, and I'm only assigned to documentation." Richard adjusted his tie. "I'll reconsider the assignments. In the meantime, I need you to help Tyler and Lisa get their modules working. The full system test is in 2 weeks." I nodded. "I'll review their code and provide feedback." Again, I didn't promise to fix anything. I just agreed to review. That weekend, I received panicked texts from both Tyler and Lisa. Tyler's regional system was still failing when tested with real data volumes. Lisa couldn't figure out why the prediction engine was generating inconsistent results. I responded with questions rather than solutions. "What specific error messages are you seeing? Have you checked the data transformation module? Did you review the architecture diagram on page 17? I was teaching them to fish, not handing them fish. The difference was that they'd never learned to fish in the first place, and the client was expecting a seafood banquet in 10 days. By Sunday night, Tyler was making progress, but Lisa was still stuck. She finally called me, her voice tense with frustration. "Maya, I've tried everything you suggested. Nothing works." "What does the error log show?" I asked. "Something about tensor dimensions not matching." "I don't even know what that means." I did. It was a basic machine learning concept, one Lisa should have understood before being assigned the prediction engine. Monday morning, Martin Taylor called a project review. The entire executive team was there, along with Richard and the implementation team. I was invited at the last minute. "I understand we're having some issues with the MaxiCorp system," Martin said, looking around the table. Richard, what's the status? Richard cleared his throat. We've encountered some technical challenges with implementation. Tyler is working through the regional allocation system, and Lisa is addressing some issues with the prediction engine. Martin frowned. The client check-in didn't go as smoothly as I'd hoped. Diana Wang called me personally afterward. She seemed impressed with the technical design but concerned about our ability to deliver. His eyes landed on me. She specifically mentioned your explanation of the surge protocols, Maya. Said it was the only part of the meeting that gave her confidence. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I kept my expression neutral. Maya, Martin said, what's your assessment of the situation? For a moment, I considered downplaying the problems. It would have been the team player thing to do. But I was done covering for a team that had erased me. The implementation is significantly behind schedule, I said clearly. The regional allocation system needs a complete architecture review, and the prediction engine may need to be rebuilt from the ground up. The room went silent. Richard stared at me like I'd betrayed him. Maybe I had. Can it be fixed in time for delivery? Martin asked. Yes, I said, if the right people are working on the right modules. Martin nodded slowly. Richard, I want you to restructure the team assignments today. Maya, you'll lead the technical implementation from now on. Richard will handle client communications and project management. Richard started to protest, but Martin cut him off. This isn't a discussion. We need to deliver this system on time and working perfectly. As we left the meeting, Richard whispered, "This isn't how team players behave." I smiled. I'm not interested in playing anymore. I reorganized the implementation team that afternoon. I assigned Tyler to documentation. He was actually quite good at explaining things clearly. I took over the prediction engine myself and gave Lisa the user interface, which matched her skills better. The regional allocation system went to Raj, who had the strongest architecture background besides me. For the first time, people were working on what they were good at, not what made Richard look good. I stayed late that night, rebuilding Lisa's broken implementation of the prediction engine. It was a mess. She had misunderstood fundamental concepts and created a tangle of inefficient code. It would have never worked. As I coded, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, the pure joy of solving problems. No politics, no hidden agendas, just elegant solutions to complex challenges. By midnight, I had a working prototype. Not perfect, but functional. A good start. The next morning, I called a technical review. I walked the team through what I'd found, what I'd fixed, and what still needed work. I was clear about the problems without blaming anyone. Lisa looked relieved rather than defensive. She knew she'd been assigned something beyond her skills. Questions? I asked at the end. Tyler raised his hand. Why didn't we structure the team this way from the beginning? Before I could answer, Richard walked in. He'd been absent from the technical review, probably in a meeting with Martin. Schedule update, he announced, ignoring the fact that he'd interrupted. The client wants a progress demo next Monday. Martin has assured them we're back on track. He looked at me. Maya, I need a status report by end of day. What can we actually show them? For the first time, Richard was asking me directly what was possible, not telling me what to do. We'll have the prediction engine and user interface functional, I said. The regional system will be partially implemented, enough for a controlled demonstration. He nodded. No argument, no pushback. Just acceptance that I now knew more about the project status than he did. We worked through the weekend, not because Richard demanded it, but because the team was finally excited about what we were building. Raj made breakthrough progress on the regional system. Tyler created documentation that actually helped users understand the system. Lisa designed an interface that made complex operations intuitive. And me? I refined the prediction engine until it was even better than my original prototype. Faster, more accurate, more adaptable. Richard stayed out of our way, focusing on preparing the client presentation. He was good at that part, making things look polished and professional. He just wasn't good at building what he was selling. Sunday night, the team went out for pizza. Richard wasn't invited. As we ate, Tyler raised his glass. To Maya, he said, for actually knowing what she's doing. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. It felt good to be acknowledged, even in this small way. Later, as we were leaving, Lisa pulled me aside. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you before," she said quietly, "when they took credit for your work." The Monday demo exceeded expectations. Diana Wang nodded appreciatively as I walked her team through the prediction engine. The MaxiCorp engineers asked technical questions that I answered confidently. Even their CEO seemed impressed. Richard handled the business aspects smoothly: timeline, resources, expected ROI. We actually made a good team when we stayed in our respective lanes. After the demo, Diana asked to speak with me privately. Richard looked concerned, but couldn't object without seeming defensive. In the small conference room, Diana got straight to the point. "The system architecture is impressive, Maya. Richard presented it last month, but somehow your explanation makes much more sense." I chose my words carefully. "I'm very familiar with the architecture. I designed it." Diana raised an eyebrow. "Richard gave me the impression it was his concept that the team executed." "That's not accurate," I said simply. She nodded slowly. "I thought so. Your name wasn't on any of the materials, but the way you understand the system, no one has that level of insight into something they didn't create." The next morning, Martin called me into his office. My stomach tightened. Had Richard complained about my conversation with Diana? "Close the door, Maya," Martin said, his expression unreadable. I sat across from him, waiting. "Diana Wang called me yesterday after the demo," he began. "She was very impressed with the system progress and specifically mentioned your contribution. She also mentioned something interesting." He leaned forward. "She seems to believe you're the primary architect of the entire system. Is that accurate?" This was the moment. I could downplay my role to protect Richard, or I could tell the truth. I thought about my folder labeled "When They Ask," with all the evidence of my work. "Yes," I said. "I designed the system architecture, created the prototype, and wrote the core algorithms. I have documentation showing my contribution from the project's beginning." Martin's expression didn't change. "And why wasn't this clear in our client materials?" "You'd have to ask Richard that question." Martin scheduled a project review for that afternoon. Everyone was there: the implementation team, Richard, the executive staff. Martin opened with a bombshell. "It has come to my attention that there's been some confusion about the development of the MaxiCorp system. Before we proceed, I want to clarify who is responsible for what." Richard shifted in his chair. I kept my eyes on my notebook. "Maya," Martin said, "would you please explain your role in developing this system?" All eyes turned to me. I spoke clearly and factually. "I designed the system architecture after the initial project was assigned to me. I created the prototype, including the prediction engine, regional allocation system, and surge protocols. I wrote approximately 80% of the codebase before implementation began." The room was silent. Then Martin asked, "Does anyone dispute this characterization?" Richard looked like he might speak, then thought better of it. No one said a word. "In that case," Martin continued, "all client-facing materials will be updated to reflect Maya as the lead architect. Richard will continue as project manager for implementation and delivery." Richard caught up with me in the parking lot after work. His face was flushed with anger. "You couldn't just be a team player, could you? You had to make this about you." I stopped walking and faced him. "This was never about me. It was about honesty. You took credit for work you didn't do and couldn't even explain." "That's how business works," he snapped. "Senior people present to clients, junior people do the work." "Presenting is fine," I replied. "Pretending you created something you didn't isn't." He shook his head. "You've made an enemy, Maya, not just with me. People don't like team members who put themselves above the group." I laughed. I actually laughed. The team is finally functioning because people are working on what they're good at instead of what makes you look good. Everyone's happier except you. As I walked away, I realized I wasn't afraid of his threats anymore. The next day, I received an email from HR requesting a meeting to discuss my compensation. It wasn't scheduled by Richard. It came directly from Julie Patel, the compensation director. I forwarded it to Richard as a courtesy. He didn't respond. In Julie's office, she got straight to the point. "We've reviewed your contribution to the MaxiCorp project and your current compensation level. There's a significant discrepancy." She slid a paper across the desk. It outlined a 22% salary increase, effective immediately. This adjustment brings you in line with others in similar roles with similar responsibilities, she explained. I thought about pointing out that I'd been asking for this adjustment for months. Instead, I just said, "Thank you. This is appropriate." Julie smiled slightly. Martin was quite clear that we needed to correct this situation promptly. As I stood to leave, she added, "He also mentioned you should be credited properly on all client materials moving forward." The system implementation accelerated over the next 2 weeks. With the team properly organized and everyone clear on their responsibilities, we made more progress than in the previous month. Richard maintained a chilly professionalism. He handled client communications and logistics, but stayed away from technical discussions. In meetings, he referred questions to me without making eye contact. I didn't mind. I wasn't doing this for his approval. The updated client materials arrived with my name listed as lead architect. Richard's title was project manager. Accurate, appropriate, honest. Diana Wong noticed the change immediately during our next check-in call. "I see we're acknowledging the correct contributions now," she said, with a pointed look at Richard through the video conference. He smiled tightly. "We always strive for accuracy at Vertex." Diana turned to me. "Maya, walk us through the latest improvements to the prediction engine." I did, with confidence and clarity. It was my work, after all. 1 month later, we delivered the completed system to MaxiCorp. The final presentation was led by Richard, with technical sections presented by me. Each team member demonstrated the modules they'd built or improved. Everyone received appropriate credit. The client was thrilled. Diana's team had already run extensive tests, and the system was outperforming their expectations. The prediction engine was identifying potential inventory issues weeks before they would have been caught manually. The regional allocation system was optimizing stock levels across all locations. After the presentation, MaxiCorp's CEO announced they wanted to expand the project to include their international divisions, an additional $5.2 million contract. In the elevator afterward, Martin turned to me. "Impressive work, Maya. I'd like you to lead the technical design for the international expansion." Richard stared straight ahead, saying nothing. "I'd be happy to," I replied. "I have some ideas already for adapting the system to handle multiple currencies and regional regulations." Martin nodded. "I thought you might." 3 months after the MaxiCorp system went live, Richard accepted a position with another company. There was a small going-away gathering with supermarket cake and awkward small talk. I attended briefly, wished him well, and left early. The next week, Martin called me into his office. "With Richard's departure, we need to restructure the MaxiCorp project team for the international expansion. I'd like you to take over as project director." I blinked in surprise. "That's typically a senior management position." "Yes," Martin agreed. "And you've demonstrated the technical expertise and leadership skills required. The team respects you, and the client specifically requested that you lead the project." He pushed a folder across his desk. "Here's the compensation package. Take a day to review it." Inside was a 30% raise, a director title, and stock options. Proper recognition, at last. 1 year after I stood outside that conference room watching my work being presented without my name, I led the final review of the MaxiCorp International System. My name was on the cover slide as project director and lead architect. The team members who had stayed were credited for their specific contributions. Diana Wong had become a friend and mentor. After the international system launched successfully, she invited me to speak at a Women in Tech conference about the architecture we'd built. During my presentation, a young developer asked, "How did you get leadership to recognize your contributions when they were trying to erase you?" I thought about all the ways I could answer. The documentation I'd kept, the strategic choices I'd made, the moment I decided to stop hiding my value. "I let them need me," I said finally. "Not want me, not appreciate me, need me. I built something valuable and then stopped pretending others understood it when they didn't." The system revealed the truth. This morning, I interviewed candidates for a senior developer position on my team. One of them was a woman fresh out of graduate school, brilliant and a bit nervous. She reminded me of myself 3 years ago. "What's the most important thing you look for in a team?" she asked me toward the end. Honesty, I said without hesitation. About what you know, what you don't know, and who did the work. Everything else we can teach or learn. After she left, I looked at the organizational chart on my wall. My team had grown to 15 people, with 4 more positions opening as we expanded to new clients. Each name was there because of what they could contribute, not who they knew or how well they played politics. They tried to erase my name from my work, but systems don't work that way. Code doesn't care about office politics. Logic doesn't respond to manipulation. In the end, the truth was in the architecture all along. They just couldn't read it without me. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their work matters, even when others try to claim it. Drop a comment with your own experience. I read them all. And subscribe, because authentic recognition starts with seeing each other clearly.